Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Session. See that grin on your face? I was just saying before we got on air, I pressed start broadcast and you appeared just as it clicked and went live. So it doesn't look like you got here in the nick of time. Welcome to Seller Sessions, guys. Joining me today, Eliis, Whitehead, Troy Johnston, and of course, Anthony Lee. Subject of the day, we're going to be talking about terms of service from a developer's perspective as well. Obviously, this is a very, very sensitive subject, so we'll tread with caution. But equally, it's really important to get this out into the open for you as a seller to understand as well, because the data end of things is very, very precious. It has to be handled in a specific way, especially in Europe. With Eliis and I, we're strictly under GDPR. We're not in the software business, but obviously as an agency, we still use APIs and we still have to follow the letter of the law. But to set the tone, this is a conversation Troy, Anthony, and a few other guys are having in private, which I said, can we bring into the public domain? But more important than this, Troy, is this your first time on the show?
It is, yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to give the audience a little background on yourself and we'll go around the room?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I started selling on Amazon in late 2015. Got started in the beauty space at that point in time and ended up scaling a brand, moving on, and then did some consulting and advising before doing what I do today as a co-founder at Seller.tools, which I know will be the spirit of our conversation of tools, features, solutions for sellers in the FBA community. And that's really what makes up the bulk of my time, which I should preface before we dive into any specifics. I am not a developer. I'm definitely not a data engineer. I am a seller first who then looks at tools and is obviously very, very much pro tool, pro automation, insightful data. I'm a proponent of that, but I'm not a get my hands dirty and implement developer.
Okay. I learned something new every day. I thought you was a developer, so you had me fooled anyway. No, okay. Over to Anthony Lee.
Hi. I'm also not a developer. I think everybody knows this by now, though. Been selling since 2014, but have had the unique privilege of working for a couple of the bigger known softwares in the space. As such, I have seen the troubles and heartaches that developers go through without knowing how to code a single line of anything. So that's what I bring to the table.
I've heard you
for this conversation.
I've heard you're quite good with HTML, but we'll say that for another day. But I tell you what, we do have King Genius sitting next to it, which is Dr. Eliis Whitehead. So he makes up for all of our coding failures. But no, the key of the show is on a commercial level as well as the developmental level. Troy, Anthony, Eliis, you got heads in API documentation. Anthony, you're very on the ball when it comes to the terms of service as well. But this is really what's really important is that I want to get to that point. We'll go into it in the show and read out some bits in a minute. But I think the key thing is for a developer team like Troy's team, where you are versus like a Helium 10. If Helium 10 comes out with a feature, you want to come out with a feature, but you're unsure about the terms of service. That leaves you more exposed because you don't have the financial resources and the powers that be behind you if you get blowback or make a mistake. So the goal is I still need to move the needle as a software. I still need to be competitive with the Jungle Scouts and the Helium 10s, but equally I still need to make the ethical and the right decisions, trying to understand the verbiage. So do you want to give us a quick rundown on that key point? Shall I just go through something that you sent to me in terms of where this becomes confusing? I'll read it out and then you can break it down, yeah?
Absolutely.
So this license does not include any resale, commercial use of Amazon service or its content, any collections of any of its product listings, descriptions or prices, or derivative use of the Amazon service or of its content, any downloading, copying, or any use of account information for the benefit of a third party, or any other use of data mining, robots, or similar data gathering and extractions of tools. So effectively, in a nutshell, you got access to all of this stuff, but you're not allowed to use fuck all, because that's what that says. Does that not say that?
Yeah, that's the diplomatic way of
Yeah.
explaining it. Yes.
So effectively, this is where some of the problems will lie. Obviously, with an API, it's closed. Yeah, so you only get given what you're given. If you decide to patch stuff around it, that's when you start to maneuver around the grey areas of an ethical line. So we can put API to the side, but it's that kind of verbiage there. Well, what do you do? It's like how are you meant to communicate that? So what are some of the things that you have to do or your development team or your commercial team? What do you have to do here in order to put features out and make sure you're making the right decision without it blowing back in your face?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it makes for a great conversation to have very openly in terms of identifying really what the challenge that developers and tool providers have is the same exact thing that sellers have. Is that we were talking about it as a team and really unpacking this together. And it's, the idea of breaking terms of service or conditions or any policies that Amazon sets is that we came up with this analogy of running like a stop sign, right? And there are things that we've sort of normalized where it's like that stop sign, we perceive that to be okay, but we're going to blow past it. It's going to spin past us and we're going to continue to do so. And I think when we look at, as tool providers, that type of vague, I think very all-encompassing language, we sort of have to bring that into the context of that new feature development. And I think it also there's impact to I think a lot of metrics that we've become very dependent on that really factor into how you prioritize things like keywords or find a new product opportunity. A lot of that is really contingent upon data that comes from a product listing, BSR, keyword ranking, keyword management, that type of thing. And so there's things that are sort of inherent and maybe already problematic that we have to look at honestly. But then the challenge and the task is on us too for tool providers of, okay, if the API is the safe ground, Amazon has oversight of it, they can implement throttling and all the measures that they do there. Where is there room for innovation? Right? Where you're not already you're sort of in the moat of that uncertainty, right? And then Amazon, the API, what's all allowed is inside that castle. You do the calls, you have your throttling, you have your limitations. So it is, I think it's easy. I think analogies make the concepts quite easy to understand is really for sellers to view tool providers as having the same exact challenge of vague language, difficult to navigate, may inherently be problematic if we view it honestly, unbiased, outside-in perspective. But then that's the tall task for us too. And we want to be informative as well, is sort of let our users know, hey, this is a perceived stop sign. Here's the language that's maybe included. Have these types of conversations. But it's, this is the Amazon sandbox. It's sort of just a continuity, I think, more than anything else.
Anthony, any thoughts here?
Well, I mean, with regard to describing the challenges, I think Troy hit the nail on the head. Like, this is exactly what sellers go through. I think one of the challenges that this kind of thing brings, I just remember working for software and seeing so many users. They're always concerned about, well, are you breaking terms? Am I going to get in trouble by that's the main question, right? Am I going to get in trouble by using this? Is always the question. And it's like, and that creates a barrier. I'll never forget working for a software company when the first big ToS changed, and it basically prohibited the incentivization of reviews. And it had nothing to do with what we were doing, but I think we lost like 40% of our user base almost overnight because and like, wow, you want to talk about a tumultuous time to be running a software when this happens and 40% of your user base just vanishes overnight. It was nuts. And I realized that like it creates this tightrope situation for both users and software. It's like, we're navigating this just great. There's sharks at the bottom. You don't want to fall off, but like everything's trying to knock you off, and it's nuts. And I think it is good for users to know, like, hey, these are challenges software companies go through too. Nobody's trying to get in trouble. Nobody wants Amazon to shut them down. And so far, the one thing that I think is really positive out of all this, especially for some of the older software companies, we've been, they've been in the game long enough to see, like Troy said, the stop signs that are enforced and the ones that kind of serve Amazon so they're not so enforced, and kind of the gray area of like what enforcement looks like, to be able to at least operate with confidence that, like a much larger, more destructive hammer isn't going to come down. Now it's just a matter of nuance. Like, will this listing get temporarily suppressed until some language is moved out of it, et cetera, et cetera. That's, I think, probably the biggest danger that we look at. So that's my opinion anyway. I have no problem using software because I've been in the game long enough to see it that way.
Yeah. I think even with the bigger guy, I may be wrong, but it's not that it's political. Like you had like the elephant in the room, you're not meant to, as I understand, maybe wrong, maybe right, always fuck this one up. But the scraping for ranking position, it's almost like you're not really meant to do that, but we'll leave you alone on that. But if you do something over here, then that becomes a problem. Do you see what I mean? So even the verbiage is not clear, but I think that standoff between Amazon relationships and the developers or the companies and stuff as well, that makes it a bit of a hard bridge as well, because it's like, we know that's there, we're going to let that one ride, but as long as you don't touch this. Do you see what I mean? So there's some bombs there. Troy, do you have any issues with that kind of thing if you've come across that?
Yeah, I think really just making the point of discussing that more openly, because I think that's a super valid point, right? Is that we've gotten so used to these things that I think for maybe the everyday seller or the brand new seller, I mean, let's take somebody who is fresh to this space, has no idea, maybe they've not even heard about the complexity, the volatility of Amazon. Yeah. And so maybe we owe them a little bit more information to sort of let them know what they're getting ready for. Yeah. But something that nuanced, it takes a little unpacking of, we're used to this. Keyword ranking is immensely important. Well, you get that through scraping. Well, that's not an API activity. So you start to go down this series of really making clear how you arrive at things that are immensely important in your business, but if you point to them to the ToS and say, well, shoot, if they're familiar with those types of that type of language too, right? So this is where, for my goal would be to try to make it simple, but it's both simple and complex at the same time, right? It's Amazon just sort of has this blanket that they apply, and it's a catch-all, and you could see why it's pretty intuitive, right? They would rather just say, well, this is covered. The hammer can drop at any point in time. That can be our prerogative.
But I suppose that if they've kept it that, even to the big, we won't name names, but let's just say the very largest of those companies out there are still, even with millions invested and stuff, they still had that risk of Amazon. Maybe Amazon does that to keep things honest, like the one mistake and you could be gone. It could take you out overnight. I mean, not completely. We've never seen it happen, right? Never seen someone completely wipe out, unless it's a review thing. But I think if there is that tension left hanging, maybe that's the thing that keeps everyone honest or will not push the needle. Do you see what I mean? Right. Eliis, is there anything you can comment on? I'm going to be transparent here and say that you used to work at Jungle Scout, so you'll be limited in certain areas to comment. But is there anything you'd like to add to the conversation here?
Oh, well, one of them, Troy, as you brought up, some of this, the language in here, it wasn't written by the managers or developers that decided to create the API. It was written by a lawyer, and the lawyer might have passed it back by the manager, and the manager might have said, well, hey, why is the language here saying, yes, this is there, you cannot use it? And they would have had this discussion, and the lawyer ends up saying, no, you have to leave this in there. This is to protect our, whatever. And so there's a huge difference between everything at Amazon is so fragmented. Nobody in one department knows what's going on in another. And I'm sure that it's the same with their, the legal teams and whatnot. And so, it's in terms of actual practice, some of this stuff is pretty meaningless. So I'm sure some of it, somebody said, oh no, we need this to be in the terms of service as well. But a lot of it is not like that. And yeah, I doubt that Amazon is trying to keep us honest. I think that's a very nice way to say they want to have control.
Yeah.
And they do like having that hammer, probably, threat. And yeah, I think they would be a lot better off if they would provide, for example, the things that people do scrape for. Is there any disadvantage for them to provide that as an API? They would have more control. They would have less scraping. I mean, they'd have so much less visiting. They wouldn't. These bots visiting their website would not be having a distorting impact on the statistics. And they could charge for it. How much do companies pay to be able to scrape? Well, you could pay Amazon for the API access. And so in part, I think all of this is also, kind of like Amazon's lack of action in a place where they really should take action.
Yeah. Interesting. Anthony, you've done the rounds. You've worked at a few different levels, haven't you, in terms of size of software companies. How was it for you at these various different places when you're implementing new features? You're seeing another software doing something similar. You've read the same set of terms of service, but you're sitting there going, I don't know if this is right, but if we don't offer this feature, everyone's going to say, where is that feature? Why cannot? So you've got this merry dance you've always got to do, right? Yep. Well, I won't use your software no more because it hasn't got that feature in it. And then the other question is, but if you've got BA data and stuff, it's always that middle ground argument. Is like you want to provide the service, but on the flip side, you're going to get people going, well, does that expose their data? Does this do da-da-da-da? And suddenly the Facebook groups blow up.
So step one is always, hey, is there an API that we're allowed to get this data from? Yeah. So as soon as you see a service out there that's like they're offering this information, where do they get it? Dive in, try to find, okay, step two is there an exposed API that maybe Amazon doesn't realize is exposed? Because still, even though it could be taken away, kind of like that, the one that was open for like 15 months or whatever that showed.
Well, that was for the search volume, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So even though it could be taken away, it's, very unlikely that you'll get in trouble or anything for using it because, hey, that's not our fault that you left it open. Step three is then coming to terms with the fact that you are either going to have to scrape or you're going to have to access people's accounts, which Amazon doesn't like that either. So then you're like, okay, well, at some point we have to cross this gray area if we want to offer this service and be competitive. And then you start doing risk assessment. But I really like how Eliis just explained it the way that he did. Most of it's legal jargon, and they don't actually plan on enforcing it. It's just there to protect Amazon's interests. That makes perfect sense. And that also explains why all this stuff just gets let happen. And one interesting way to kind of experience that firsthand is being a part of an audit. I've been a part of an audit. I know Troy's been a part of at least one, if not more, audits. And what happens is you sit there and you're biting your nails going, oh my God, this could technically be construed as against terms. They're going to shut us down. This could be, and then they come back and they go, hey, see this little small part right here? This is the part you need to change.
Yeah.
And then you ask them outright. So you're saying that you don't care about this? No. You don't care about this? No. We just need you to change this. So what you're saying is you don't care about all of this? No, we just need you to change this. And you're like, wow, I've been freaking out for almost no reason this whole time. Okay, then you go make that little change and then boom, the audit's over and Amazon technically says, hey, you're fine, you're good. You're good to go. So that's been my experience, and it's really interesting from the developer standpoint.
So this is another part of the terms of service, which I thought was hilarious as well. No Amazon service nor any part of its Amazon service may be reproduced, duplicated, copied, sold, resold, visited, or otherwise exploited for any commercial purpose without express written consent of Amazon.
Yeah.
Do you want to come in on this one, Troy?
Yeah, no, that's another bit of phrase. I think I might have highlighted that.
You
that
did,
portion.
yeah. Sorry, I just took credit there, didn't I? But
No,
really,
hey.
you sent the screen grab, and you highlighted 2 bits that I read out. So credit to you. Sorry.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I think it's yeah, I mean, I don't know how you look at that and don't just chuckle. I think hopefully that's the best reaction. It's just you know, the language is just meant to be, here's a massive wet blanket over everything. And I think, you know, as we're exploring this point too, you know, this may be something that doesn't have any teeth, but we also, I mean, if we're Amazon and we know the liability that we have, it's very intuitive for them to do this, right? Every single business touch point, every single part of their ecosystem, let's just make sure it's covered. And then, you know, it's up to us to kind of speculate, how big is that stop sign? You know, which ones are we passing regularly? Which, you know, it's then up to us to decipher. But I think between those two that you've read, Danny, I think those are good things for sellers to kind of just say, okay, like tools, just like selling activity. Just like pondering super URLs and things that we kind of know, okay, these are ways that we can work the Amazon system, and we know the spirit of, you know, manipulating sales rank and that type of stuff. But it also just applies to what we would perceive as mundane stuff, data that we just like to have, you know.
Can I also ask the question as well? Because always from seller side, and it's expected and it's totally understandable, is like they don't want their own data exposed, right? So they go, well, I don't want to plug in MWS, and they're concerned about you taking their data to copy their products, all these different things that could, should, or would, could all happen. But do we know of any stories that, apart from a couple of software companies have been sold to some Chinese companies that was supposedly mined for data? It's been pretty clean, isn't it, in the space, Anthony, for that kind of activity?
Yeah, in my experience, yeah. And in fact, the one that you're referring to, I'm good friends with a guy that used to work for that company, and he to this day would get on the stand and be like, that didn't happen the way that you're saying that it happened. This is not the way that we
but the thing is, no one wants to know the truth because it gets in the way of a good story, right? So people are going to have their own optics, their own version of that truth. But people still should be precious over their data. We understand that. But I think what's important is, if it can always happen, there's still a possibility rather than say the probability of it happening. But if we look at history, since we've been in the game since 2015, it's been quite minimal, that level of exposure from a software company within the community has gone off and done bad things.
Yeah, and keep in mind that, you know, everybody, it's the Amazon ecosystem as far as sellers are concerned is really interesting, because people get super paranoid about their data. But really what they're paranoid about is, I don't want anybody to know what I'm selling and how well it's doing. And that's kind of like a unique situation, completely forgetting the fact that it's not the business model of a software company to steal people's you know, product ideas, just like it's not the business model of your factory to turn around and take that product and
it can be done
themselves. It can be done.
But it's not. It's a possibility rather than a probability. Yeah.
It's not likely, and you're sharing all of the same data every time you run Facebook ads or Google, and it's like everybody wants to look at Amazon software as the untrustworthy one. It's like everybody has this data. You have like 50 tools that don't have anything to do with Amazon that still has the same amount of data. You know, like we don't have privacy. I don't care what iOS 14 tries to accomplish. We do not have privacy. You just have to deal with it.
Yeah, indeed. Eliis, you got anything you want to add here?
So one of the things that is good about these Amazon audits is that they do, in the last couple of years, they've been really pushing privacy of seller data. And so, like, you're not allowed to expose the data of your sellers, you know, in these audits, and they will look at they'll look at how you're storing it, and do you have the data, any, you know, private data sufficiently well encrypted, and and so that is that's another thing that where Amazon is in a good way trying to protect sellers for when they do audits of the large companies. Was that part of your audit, the audit you went through, Anthony?
Yeah, actually, that was 100% what it was. So the first thing they do is they check to make sure that everything's properly encrypted. Then they say, hey, you're not allowed to store this for longer than X amount of time. There's a lot of effort that goes into making sure that private data can't be breached, right? So that's the first step, right? Like we want to make sure that it's somewhere safe so that like a hacker can't get it. And then the next step was regulating how do you use it? How do you distribute it? So what I personally went through was the moment in time when they had just decided that sellers shouldn't be allowed to utilize their buyer data on other platforms, right? Because that in itself creates a privacy breach. So this is when Amazon put the hammer down on not allowing you to have access to data that you can upload into Facebook to create custom audiences and things like that. So, we went through the encryption part, and the next step was, okay, well, now you can't provide this information anymore. So then they were trying to control the distribution, which there's even still a white hat way around that now. But that was the primary concern in that audit was customer data.
Well, I suppose as well, where it really comes questionable is when you do start to prod around and pull out data, especially anything related to the customer itself, its address, etc., postcode, exposing certain levels of information there where you're kind to piece that together with other things. I think that's where it starts to cross the line as well. It's like when you're making these decisions, like you said, Anthony, we see these appending services running around for a while. That's kind of obviously had a big impact with Amazon making changes there. But Troy, where do you guys stand on that? Where it's like, our guys can have a tap around and we can pull this out and pull this out. Is that where you say a no takes place?
Yeah, no, I mean, and so as Anthony alluded to, we went through the same process with an Amazon audit of really evaluating our encryption and security. I mean, even little knick-knacky stuff of like, security cameras in any facilities. It's pretty exhaustive. And we've actually been through 2, so it's been redundant now. But yeah, I mean, for us, it's really whatever we have unique access to and making sure that we meet some of those requirements, both internally and externally, the data that we make available through like our API. So we have our own safe use and data usage policies that we have internally. And that's the other big part of an audit too, is that you then have these SOPs and this documentation that your team has to abide by. And there's stuff that like I can't even access because it's like developer specific, login specific. I think people are sometimes surprised by that, where it's like, even if I run the company, there's things that I just can't touch because we're permitted that access, and the audit requires, and Amazon effectively requires some of that safekeeping measures. Yeah,
indeed. Is there anything we've missed or anything you want to add before we go, Troy?
I think I think having the conversation is really fruitful for, like I said, I think sellers seeing the collective challenges that we have as solutions, let's say tool providers, and ultimately I'm super pro tool provider. I think use everything at your disposal that you're comfortable using to give you an advantage on Amazon. The tricky part, the nuanced, if not ironic part, is that Amazon sort of says, oh, that's an advantage. We probably have some language on that. We have perceived limitations. And I think if we use that stop sign analogy, you kind of have to pick your stop signs. Know that you're probably already passing a few. It's almost a given. Things like having a period in your description, like things that you would just never assume would be in conditions in ToS. They're there. They really are. So I know it's not. I want it to be at the end of the day an optimistic message of being mostly informed, navigating that as you'd like, but understand that we're sort of in this together for how we can excel on Amazon carefully and intentionally. Yeah.
Anthony.
So my parting words would be, first, I definitely would not tell anyone don't do your due diligence. Like, obviously do your research, but just a couple things to keep in mind. Very unlikely, with probably 95% or more of the tools out there in the space, that you as a seller is going to get in trouble for using it unless it's like blatantly against terms that have made it to the news before, right? If you use a review service, yeah, okay, you're probably going to be held liable for that, etc. You know, if you use a service that does fake orders, yeah, you're probably going to be held liable for that. But like as far as the data and the tracking and the stuff out there, that's not what's going to happen. And actually, the hammer doesn't necessarily come down and shut everything off. You can usually see the writing on the wall, right? So we saw the move into making review services obsolete as terms changed, and then it became more publicized. It didn't happen overnight. We saw the shift in the way that we were allowed to use data as we found out that, hey, by the way, it's against terms of service to share your customer data with Facebook. And then those services started getting turned off. So even for for tool providers, like staying in touch with the information out there, you can pivot when necessary. Ultimately, the people that are in the game now have been in it for a little while, meaning that they've gone through these iterations, and very rarely is it like this huge black hat operation that gets shuts down and then your account gets shut down. Like that's kind of like the really gloomy side of what could happen in the 0.1% chance of it happening. So that's my optimism right there. Just pay attention to the terms, look at the stop signs you're passing, and trust that the tools are trying to do
it by the right way. But sometimes they'll make a mistake or perceived mistake because everyone's trying to read between the lines. And like go back to what I said earlier on, I imagine for Troy, you feel unfair if the bigger guys, and I say this with the greatest respect, they've got a great sized software company, but you've got your market, like the big guys, and then you've got your mid-tier. Well, that's where I put Troy and where his guys are, very successful business. But then if the big guys are going to go and add these features, and it's like, I want to add these features as well, but he has to be careful because of blowback, because he doesn't have the financial resources. So I think it's about level playing field and trying to make the best ethical decisions that you can. And like as a seller, is to understand some of these challenges that people have, and if you think the terms of service as a seller's bad, try being a developer would be the answer.
Keep in mind too, though, that Amazon is not one to shut down one service for breaking a specific term. Like when they decide, oh, we got a lot of press about this, we're going to shut this down. They're not one to shut down one and then leave the others. So the big guys are doing it. Like, don't worry until one of them stops, and then you can be like, okay, well, it looks like Amazon's actually bringing this hammer down. Yeah,
indeed. Eliis?
I think everything's been said pretty well.
Cool. Excellent, guys. I'll be back here at 4 p.m. BST tomorrow. I'll be talking about the hunger score, doing a round table, one of the most difficult areas of A9 to properly understand. So I have a round table of people. We'll pick that apart, then show them back on Thursday. Thank you to my guests, Anthony Lee, Eliis Whitehead, and Troy. Troy, what's the best way that people can reach you?
Yeah, so come and find us at seller.tools. That's the URL, the domain. Would encourage you to check us out there. And if we can reach out to me, my team, hello@seller.tools. Would love to think more on the bright side of tools, how we can help data, automation, all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Excellent. Anthony?
Anthony Lee, or at Anthony Lee 991. Pretty much any platform.
Cool. And you know how to reach me and Eliis. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Much love, and take care of your family. We'll be back here tomorrow, 4 p.m.